What's up, everyone? It's Andrew Demani. Welcome back to Permission to Shine podcast. Thank you for being here. We've got episode 42 today. I feel lucky to do this as my full-time job. I get to highlight the most inspiring, interesting, humble people around the world. And because of that, it's expensive. We do all these episodes in person. I'm constantly traveling to far places. We rent studios, right? We do these in person. We market them. It is an expensive thing that I work very hard on bringing you guys the best product possible. And because of that, I have a favor and ask of you guys. If you enjoy Permission to Shine, please share this with a friend, a colleague, a loved one that you think will benefit from it, and follow it on all platforms. It means the world to me. Thank you guys for doing it. I just wrapped up some epic time in New York City, my favorite place in the world. The place keeps you sharp, that is for sure. I rolled in. I was like a little anxious. Like I've been a little worried about like finances and money and future and all these small things. So I started focusing just on the day to day. And New York forced me to take a step back and be like, dude, what's the big picture here? Like, what are you trying to accomplish when you're on your deathbed someday? And it just makes me so efficient, so pointed. And I guess you just cut the BS when you're in that New York state of mind. So New York, thank you for hosting me and making it such a wonderful visit. When I was in the city, I got to record today's episode. Jeffrey Deskovic. This guy has the most inspiring story. And by the way, heavy trigger warning. We're going to be talking about some things that include murder and rape. So please, if this is something that will be triggering to you, bail out now. If you're with it, buckle in for a ride. We are going to blast off. He was wrongly convicted of murder and rape when he was in high school. He then went and spent 16 years in a maximum security prison for something he did not do. DNA evidence eventually cleared him. There was a $25 million payout that followed. And what's he do, right? Me, I might head to the beach, right? My freedom was just stolen from me. My whole life taken away in an instant. But what he did is he went to law school and he started the Deskovic Foundation. And now he frees people who are wrongly convicted. What an amazing guy. So buckle in, reach out with feedback, reach out with takeaways. Andrew at permissiontoshine.org. As always, thank you for being here. I love you guys. Let's jump into this insane episode with Jeff.
Where does your story start?
Back in 1990 in Peekskill, which is in Westchester County, New York, so suburbs.
What happened?
So a classmate of mine was found murdered and raped. The Peekskill is a small city, population approximately 25,000 people. Murders are pretty rare. So when this murder happens, it creates an atmosphere of fear, rumor, paranoia. So she went missing. That was a news story. And her body turned up a couple days later. She was found murdered naked from the waist down.
She's a friend of yours.
No, she's a classmate in two of my classes, a freshman, one is a sophomore. I know her name, she knows mine. That's really the extent of it. She's a 15-year-old immigrant from Colombia in the country for about a year and a half, leading a very sheltered life. Never goes anywhere, as I understood it, unless she was with her older sister or her parents. And so she got an assignment from her photography class, to take some pictures of some foliage, and so she goes home with her sister. Her sister uses the restroom. She comes back out. Angela's gone. She decides to go and do this photography class assignment on her own. There was a male student that was assigned to take the pictures with her, but he played hooky on the assignment. So she's by herself in this wooded area in Hillcrest Park. It's a really thick wooded area which connects condominiums on one end and a school on another. And she has the misfortune of coming across a 29-year-old drug addict who's high, and he sees her and he murders and rapes her, and she goes missing for a couple of days, and her body gets found a couple of days later.
That's horrible. 15-year-old
15-year-old
immigrant.
Yes.
That's basically the worst of the worst.
100%. So the police interview a lot of students from the high school, and some of them told the police, well, they might want to speak with me because I'm quiet, I'm to myself. So I mean, I kind of live a double life back then. I didn't think of it that way, but I realized that that's really what it was. There's my life in school and my life after school. So after school, I'm one of the main kids in the apartment complex and the surrounding area. So in general, whatever it is I suggest is probably going to be what we do. When I play kickball, basketball, stickball, and ride bikes, Monopoly, swim, go to the movies. But that's my life after school. In school, the kids are a little bit older than I am. I'm not familiar with them, so I'm kind of like on the fringes of the society there. And I think that their thought process in suggesting to the police that they might want to speak with me is that people that are loners or quiet that are to themselves commit heinous crimes. My point is that's how I get on the police
That's a bit of a
radar.
reach, right? It's like, what are we just
Oh,
gonna
it's
go?
a
We're just gonna
huge
go after all the
reach.
quiet kids?
It's a very big reach.
There must have been more than that, no?
Yes, I'm going to get to that right now. That's the first factor. Second factor is I'm a sensitive teenager. This is my first brush with death, and I had an emotional reaction. And the police thought that, given that I barely knew the victim, that that must be some sort of outward sign that I was sorry for what I did. And the third thing is that they got a psychological profile from the NYPD, which purports to have the psychological characteristics of the actual perpetrator. And I have the misfortune of matching that. And so it's a reinforcing factor.
I'm curious, real quick on that.
Yes.
You had a strong reaction to her death, and
Yes.
rightfully so. It's like a very violent crime.
Sure.
Do you remember why you reacted so strongly to it?
Sure, because I had a chance to meet the family afterwards. There were many people that went to multiple sessions of the wake, the interment, the church service. General invitation was extended to people to go back to the family house, have coffee, tea, pastries, and so I availed myself of that invite, and so I met the family, and they had the room kind of like preserved how it was. And so I saw pictures of her and how the bedroom was, and it just kind of brought everything kind of like to real life to me. And so that was really that really was what triggered it. And I want to point out that I really wasn't all that different from most of the other people in Peekskill. I mean, this really affected many people to the point that there were free mental health services offered to anybody who wanted it. The next 6 weeks, then, the police play this cat and mouse game with me, in which every time they meet up with me, they start out talking to me as a suspect. But when they push too hard and they become frightened and I want to get away from them, Jeff as this junior detective helper theme was developed. They would say things like, "Well, the kids won't talk freely around us, but they will around you. Let us know if you hear anything. Stop in from time to time." They'd ask me opinion questions, congratulate me that my opinion was correct. I came from a single parent household, and my father was never involved in my life in any aspect. And that intersects with the good cop, bad cop routine, in which one officer takes on a more aggressive role, the other pretends to be a friend. So I began to look at the officers pretending to be my friend as a father figure. So eventually they said, "Look, we got some new information in the file. We want to share that with you. That's going to allow you to be even more helpful to us. First, though, you have to take and pass a polygraph." So the next day, rather than reporting to the high school, I went to the police station for the test. Mom and grandma thought I'm in school because it's a school day, so they don't call around looking for me. But instead, they drove me from Peekskill. They drove me across county lines, 40 minutes away by car, to the town of Brewster in Putnam County to bring me to the polygraphist, who's a Putnam County Sheriff's investigator. So he's dressed like a civilian, never identifies himself as law enforcement, never reads me my rights. I don't have an attorney present. They didn't give me anything to eat. I don't know. Yeah,
17 years old.
16 at this point. Yeah. So I don't understand all the big words that are in this 4-page brochure which explains how the polygraph works. But I figure, well, I'm there to help the police. So what does it matter?
No big deal.
Let's just get on with it. So from there, they put me in a small room. The polygraphist gives me countless cups of coffee to get me nervous. And then he attaches me to this polygraph machine. And then he launches into his third degree tactics. So he raises his voice at me. He invades my personal space. He keeps asking me the same questions over and over again. Each hour passes, my fear increases in proportion to the time. And he keeps this up for like 6.5 to 7 hours. Towards the end, he said, "What do you mean you didn't do it? You just told me through the test result that you did. We just want you to verbally confirm it." Now, that really shot my fear through the roof. And at that point, the officer who had been pretending to be my friend, he comes in the room and tells me, "The other officers are going to harm you. I've been holding them off. I can't do this any longer. You have to help yourself. Look, just tell them what they want to hear. You can go home afterwards. You're not going to be arrested." Being young, naive, frightened, 16 years old, I wasn't thinking about the long term. I was just concerned with my safety in the moment. I was in fear of my life. The fact that I didn't know where I was and no one else knew where I was either loomed quite large in my mind. And then there was this push-pull dynamic, the possibility of harm on one hand, and on the other, this false life preserver. So I decided to make up a story based on the information which they gave me that day in the 6 weeks run up to it. By the time it was all said and done, I had collapsed on the floor in a fetal position, crying uncontrollably. Obviously, I was arrested. I was charged with the murder and rape.
And just gone to jail.
I was arrested. Yeah, I the interrogation was not videotaped. It was not audio taped. There's no signed confession. It's just their word for it. And so later on, when they came to court, they left the threat and false promise out of their story.
And so is there a full trial?
There is. Now, before the trial, the DNA test shows that seminal fluid found the victim doesn't match me, but the prosecution gets the medical examiner to commit fraud, commit perjury. So when there's an autopsy done, there's written and audio notes which are taken at the same time. And so it was only after the DNA didn't match me, hundreds of autopsies later, that this medical examiner suddenly says that he remembers that he forgot
Hmm.
to document medical evidence that he claims shows that the victim had been sexually active, which is what opened the door for the prosecutor to argue that that was how the DNA didn't match me, and yet I was guilty, that she was promiscuous, that she was sleeping around and slept with someone before she was murdered and raped by me. And that was all a lie. That was all made up. Taking it a step further, he mentions another youth by name that he claimed had slept with the victim, but he never tried to prove that. Like, he didn't get a DNA sample. He didn't call him as a witness. He just made the unsupported argument to the jury. And he got away with that because the victim's family was not coming to court. So they had no idea the terrible things that were being said about her in court in the furtherance of trying to convict me. And more importantly, my public defender essentially didn't defend me. He let him get away with it. He rarely met with me, was always shutting me up when I would tell him I was innocent, what happened in the interrogation room. One time he told me he didn't care if I was guilty or innocent. He never interviewed or called as a witness my alibi. I was actually playing wiffle ball when the crime happened. He should have never represented me because of a conflict of interest. So this other youth that the prosecutor was falsely saying had slept with the victim was represented by another member of that same public defender agency, and specifically by the lawyer that was supposed to be supervising him on my case. So that conflict prevented the defense from uh, asking him to give a DNA sample. It prevented the defense from calling him as a witness. He never explained to the jury the significance of the DNA not matching me, never used that to challenge the confession. Lastly, in terms of the false confession, he was all over the place. Sometimes he told the jury that the confession never happened. Other times he told them, well, it did happen, but it was coerced. And still other times he said it was a false confession. So by taking an approach of just throwing mud against the wall and hoping that something stuck, he had to have been standing there in front of the jury with no credibility at all. So the end result of everything was that I was found guilty. I had been charged and tried as an adult. So I was given a 15 to life sentence, which the judge gave me despite saying maybe you are innocent. And then I was taken to prison.
And what's going through your head as all of this is so quickly happening?
So I can't believe all this is happening, but at some point, I began to believe that everything was going to be okay because many members of my extended family were kind of in my ear. Everyone believed in the court system, and they all believed that I was innocent, so they thought that I would be found not guilty.
So people were still behind you.
People were still behind. Well, my extended family was behind me, not the community in general. Because when the
To me, that'd be
cops
the worst
arrest-
part, right? The teacher's looking at you like, oh, you fucking creep, and you're like this innocent 16-year-old kid. Like, to me, that's the most humiliating, aggravating piece.
It was, and I was a very hated figure in Peekskill at that point. Because it was a heinous crime, and then newspaper. When a police arrest somebody, it's natural that people will think that the person arrested is guilty, and then newspaper reports of a confession facilitate that belief. So I was hated. I lost just about all my friends at that point because why would they want to play or hang out with me? Why would their parents allow them to? But yeah, I was sent to a men's maximum security prison at that point with a 15 to life sentence.
And what's that like, showing up to prison?
That was a very, very scary experience. Picture yourself in handcuffs, having your chain around your waist, your legs fastened together, fastened to the leg of the prisoner on the bus next to you. Imagine how large the prison wall is, how menacing the barbed wire appears. Imagine walking down a cell gallery, many prisoners there whose arms was big as your legs, and then you're there for a sex offense, which there's a vigilante mentality towards people convicted of sex
Is that
offenses.
true?
That is true. Yeah. So it was very dangerous there. So uh, 3 or 4 stabbings or cuttings every day, other
What do you mean?
violence.
Oh, like
In
just
the
like
general,
throughout? Yeah.
general,
Okay.
general, and yeah, it's
Yes.
an environment where there's adrenaline and violence that permeates the air. The
Were you ever the target of some of that?
not of stabbings or cuttings, but I was beat up a number of times. One time, I nearly did lose my life because of that. Sure, over the course of the years, the guards were obstacles as well. Some of them brought their frustrations, their personal life into the facility, displacing their aggression. The food was terrible. Sometimes it was burned. Other times it wasn't fully cooked. I mean, I had to keep fighting off feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, thoughts of giving up, suicidal ideation. So it wasn't just the absence of your freedom, but it's all of these other things. It was very lonely. So my brother came 3 times in 16 years, not at all in the last decade.
Why?
It was a long trip. It was like 4.5 hours from Peekskill to Elmira. And then, the way the visitor processing, where the way that the guards slowly process people and hearing all these doors slam behind you, it was a little bit much for him. I had several sets of aunts and uncles that they would visit, but then disappear for 3 years, visit, disappear for 3 years. So I would have that continue. My mother was my
Dude, I want to give you a
closest
hug.
big.
You went
I
through
I
it,
I
man.
went through it. It was very difficult. It gets worse. My grandmother passed away 6 years into the wrongful imprisonment, and then the last 5, 6 years, my mother came, like, once every 6 months. So, for most intents and purposes, I did most of the time by myself, so it definitely was a lonely experience as
Did
well.
you make friends? Or like how does your mind like you're a man of strategy, obviously you're very
Yeah.
intelligent and articulate here, even just telling the story, getting to know you. Are you kind of go into survival and start to think of like how you're gonna operate within prison and
Sure.
build systems?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Well, there's old timers that, pull me to the side, and one person might give me one tip, another person give me another tip, but I'm smart enough to like listen and to like implement. Yeah, you
You should
have
have started a podcast in prison. Make your friends, you know? You gotta get
I would study people for like a month or two, before I even say hello, because I mean, kind of like in the free society, I mean, most violence is not occurring with strangers; it's with people that you talk and interact with. So I would study people for like a month or two. There were a lot of people there that they had like a metaphorical storm cloud above their head. So my only goal was to make sure that when they eventually self-destructed, that they didn't like take me down with them. Yeah, so but, you limit your associations, and there were people I would play basketball with, people I would play chess with, other people I would play ping pong with, so other people I might watch, sports on TV with, but I tried to make sure I kept everybody at a couple of arms, lengths, just breaking that rule just for a few people in a few limited circumstances.
any other tips or tricks that you kind of picked up on
Yeah.
in terms of connecting with people or maybe staying away from people?
Yeah, so again, in studying people, I tried to figure out like who was in what gang and who was not in any gang. So I didn't like I tried not to socialize with anyone that was in any gangs, because if they were attacked by any other gang member and while I was hanging out with them, then they might attack me also. So that's one tip. I didn't borrow anything from anybody. I didn't gamble. I didn't get involved with discussions about what was going to be watched on the TV. When you're in your cell, stay in your cell. You don't need to be in conversations with people behind your gate, because you don't know who may jump into what conversation. It could lead to something. And then, mind your business. I never got involved in prison politics, and I never like claimed like this bench or this area, or, let me see your papers. What are you in for? None of that foolishness. My goal was just to try to regain my freedom and rejoin my family as quickly as I could, work on my case, and other than that, just try to orient everything I did in the prison to having some kind of potential benefit if and when I regain my freedom. So, for example, I didn't waste my time being like a janitor, what they call a porter. I got GED, completed associates, got a year towards the bachelor's degree at the time funding was cut. I did vocational trades, plumbing, typing, general business, computer repair. Took a class on how adults learn, worked as a teacher's aide for a year and a half, worked in food service for 5 or 6 years. From 98 to 2006, read 3 or 4 nonfiction books a week. All that in addition to fighting my case. So going to law library, studying collecting articles about other people who were exonerated, like who helped them, what route did they take, and using that as motivation to continue writing letters, trying to find legal help that I needed. So I made use of the time, I guess is what I'm getting at. And look, find routines. So I love Sundays. For example, during NFL season, I love Sundays. So I would kind of like dose out on football. I have what we call the super radio. It had really good sound, really good reception, unlike some of the other radios. And I would listen to the 1 o'clock game, listen to the 4 o'clock game, and then Sunday night football. And of course, the next night I'd have Monday night football. And you cook a cell meal with the hot pot on a Sunday, so you have a little bit of routine. And then lastly, another survival tactic too, not survival, but just in terms of how I got through the experience. Look, managing things. So like I wasn't doing a 15 life sentence in my mind. I thought I just had to hold on for like a year or two to the next appeal.
Break it down in chunks.
Correct. And then when I would play sports, when I play basketball, ping pong, or chess, I would pretend like I was a professional player, and that's so everyone else was. But it really wasn't like uh, kids fooling around on a playground. This was more like a survival mode. I needed to leave the prison for a couple hours. That was the box that my mind created. And it's not my prison assignment in the morning, my prison assignment in the afternoon. I'm going to school, I'm going to
Professional.
work. It's
You
professional,
yes.
right? So the usage of euphemisms, the way you frame things, and it's the superintendent, it's not the prison wards, and it's the correction officers, it's not the guards. So usage of euphemisms and delusion. We talked a little bit a moment ago about sports, but then also I would collect not articles. I would collect pages out of magazines, nature scenes. I would cut the nature scenes out, hang them up on a certain area of the cell, and kind of like travel there. And I would go to sleep in such a way that when I woke up, I could see the nature cell. Look, I'll get to the damn cell bars, cell walls, the guards. I'll get enough visual cues to remind me I'm wrongfully in prison. That'll come soon enough. Doesn't have to be the first thing I wake up to or go to sleep.
Where did you have? Do you remember? Was it like national parks, or is there anywhere specific?
Well, there was some beaches in Florida, and there was a real estate company called Ginn, Ginn, and they were doing new construction of these houses and places in Florida where there's fields and there's some beaches and everything. I remember I even asked them to send me their catalog of their houses, and they sent it in. I don't think they really realized I was a prisoner necessarily, but I love those pictures, man. So Jen, if you're out there, good stuff.
Thank you for walking us through that. I'm curious, real quick, on the prison dynamics, and then I want to move on to kind of the next chapter in your story, Jeff. When you go in, right, it's like, do you want to be low key and like not seen and then perceived as maybe weak potentially?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you kind of have to have this like confidence about you so that people like, all right, don't F with that guy? Like, what's that balance?
Yeah, the balance is you want to be low key and to yourself, but you want to carry yourself with a level of respect. And so what is it's that the mysterio, the mysteriousness, the mystique of you not being a known quantity is what's going to maintain some respect. And so win, lose, or draw, okay, you cannot allow anybody to verbally disrespect you. You can't allow them to take anything. You cannot come up with a justification on how this one piece of property of yours or the other really isn't that important that you'll just let it go. No, the first time someone tries to take something, or first time someone tries you, you have to defend yourself and fight to maintain your stuff.
And you had to do that?
And I had to do that. Sure, of course. If you don't, you're opening the door to even more problems than if you don't.
So you drew the boundary.
I drew the boundary.
You were like, hey, that's not allowed.
Yeah,
Cut that shit out.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So you're sitting there and you have not given up hope.
Correct.
And your family still is standing behind you.
Yes.
100% of the way.
Yeah, they're standing by me, but just understand. Let's define what that means, though.
Please.
They believe in me, but that belief is not translating into them maintaining contact with me, sort of morale. And it's certainly not translating when my mother made rounds a few times, trying to get everybody to put in a manageable amount of money. Let's pool our resources. Let's hire the necessary legal investigative help Jeff needs. No one was in for that.
Insanely expensive, right?
Yes. Yeah, it was insanely expensive. Maybe like place lawyers wanted like $15,000 to $25,000, and that's not what we had money for. If we all would have combined, yeah, then, but nobody was willing to contribute. Um, I mean, that's what I meant when you asked me, well, are they standing behind me? Well, in a way, yes, but in a lot of important respects, no.
No, you were on your own.
Correct.
Yeah, you were
Correct.
fighting it. What did you want to be? Like before all this went down, did you have aspirations of being a professional? Obviously, you were young, so maybe not. But I'm just kind of curious what you had envisioned for the life in front of you.
Sure. So prior to my teenage years, I wanted to be a cop, which is how Jeff is this junior detective helper theme. I was so susceptible to
Oh,
that.
you were living a fantasy. Yeah, okay.
Right.
Yep.
Now, once I hit my teenage years, I did want to become an attorney. That was because my mother had a personal injury attorney, and he was well dressed. He had the attaché case, the suit. He appeared to be well compensated and respected. So I did aspire to be an attorney, but had nothing to do with wrongful convictions, nothing to do with criminal law. I just wanted to go the same route that he did. But there is two quick points that I forgot to mention. I'd like to mention now in terms of surviving the whole prison routine. I want to give a quick shout out. There was another prisoner there named Frank Sterling, who was wrongfully imprisoned also. And so once every 6 weeks, Frank and I would get together, and half the conversation would be about continuing morale wise, and the other half the session time would be to brainstorm what's the next move to make. So, by the way, Frank was exonerated through DNA testing after 18 years in prison.
Can you explain the definition of exonerate real quick?
Yes, that means he was proven innocent. So Frank was exonerated through DNA testing 2 years after I was. My point in mentioning that is that it's not like I was just naively believing he was innocent just because I happened to have been. So that was one thing. And the second thing is the lack of outside contact led me to place some ads looking for pen pals, and one person from Sacramento did answer my pen pal ad. And so he helped me continue on in my last year. I was openly asking the stranger. They didn't know from a can of paint. Look, do you think I should quit? Do you think I should give up? Should I just commit suicide? I'm never going to get out of here. And so he was encouraging me to keep going. Now, his substantive ideas on how to get out of prison, how to get the legal help, I mean, he didn't know what he was talking about. So what I did was I got away from his specific ideas and just focused in on the morale part of his letter, and we would talk sports, in the letters. I would ignore that part. But that was a crucial role. I felt like he showed up right in the nick of time.
That's beautiful. Kindness is how we evolve, right? Like
Yes.
there's people supporting each other through kindness. And maybe at the time when you're receiving it, it doesn't make sense of why they're doing it. But
Right.
It's such a beautiful thing to pay forward.
Absolutely.
So shout out to those people. I'm glad you brought those up. Tell me about when things started to shift for the better.
Walking you through my case a little bit, because that's part of that answer. So I lost 7 appeals. Okay, so that took 11 years. Let me walk you through real quick. So I had a different lawyer, different public defender, and that lawyer argued that I was innocent based on the DNA. She argued that there was legally insufficient evidence. The prosecution hadn't proven guilt beyond reasonable doubt, that the verdict was against the weight of the evidence. She argued that my Fifth Amendment rights were violated by the way I've been questioned. She argued a total of 10 issues of law, okay, including the judge being biased. So absolutely great job. The court ruled that I was free to come and go as I wanted, and therefore the statements were voluntary. They ruled that there was overwhelming evidence of guilt, which makes no sense. The only thing they have is this highly questionable confession contradicted by the DNA. But they rule that way. And then they knock out all the rest of my issues by writing, they looked at my remaining contentions and found them either to be without merit or else not preserved for review. They ruled against me 5-0. So it's all downhill from there. The re-argument motion is denied in one word, denied. The New York Court of Appeals declined to give me permission to appeal to them. So I lost there. Lost in federal court because my lawyer was given the wrong information by the court clerk, which resulted in my petition arriving 4 days too late, which the court, the then district attorney of Westchester, Janine Pirro, her office took the position that those 4 days were prejudicial to the government. So the court just simply ruled that I was late. And that's what the court did. So now I lost just based on the lateness. Challenged that ruling at the Federal Court of Appeals, got permission to appeal to them, where future U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor and her colleague Judge Pooler upheld that ruling. Then they denied the re-argument motion, the same 2 judges, and then the U.S. Supreme Court declined to give me permission to appeal to them. So now my appeals are over. That's 7 appeals. We're 11 years in. Only way back in the court now at this point is if you can find some previously unknown evidence of innocence, which would probably have led to a different outcome, or if there's some sort of retroactive change in the law. I had no money to hire an investigator or an attorney, hence the letter writing campaign. So I wrote letters for 4 years, large law firms, nonprofits, faith-based organizations, if even non-lawyers. If I could come up with an action, something somebody could do, which could uh, culminate in other things happening, which ultimately resulted in my getting the legal representation I needed, I wrote the letter. So for 4 years, that was my legal work. What turned things was one of the letters I wrote a book author
Uh-huh.
and care. The book was called Chicken Soup for the Prisoner's Soul. And I noticed that it had like many chapters from many books inside that book, and about half of the authors had contact information. So at that point, I was going through the general library in order to get addresses of new people to write to and seeking help to try to undo the conviction and regain my freedom.
How many letters do you think you wrote?
Hundreds, hundreds. So there was a book author there, Tekla Miller, who had wrote a book about her memoirs from when she had been a warden of a men's maximum security prison in California, of all places. So I borrowed the book so I could write her and the other authors. So I wrote them in care of the publishing company, but someone at the publishing company sent it to an investigator, Claudia Whitman. And Claudia wrote back and she said, "Look, I can't take your case. I'm working out of Colorado and Maine, but I will help you network to try to get the legal help you need." And so one of her ideas was the winning one. She had me write the Innocence Project again, a nonprofit organization here in Manhattan that works to free wrongfully convicted prisoners in cases where DNA testing can demonstrate innocence. So I wrote them originally in 92, 93, but they had never came across a case at that point where the DNA had excluded somebody and yet a conviction had resulted. So their method of taking cases then was just get testing and introduce the evidence as newly discovered evidence. That really wasn't an option for me because the DNA was already known. It wouldn't have been anything new. So fast forwarding back to 2005, 2006, the investigators said, "Look, the DNA data bank's been created. So the prior denial was irrelevant. Just write them again." So I did, filled out their application, and I forgot about it. Looked for other ways of getting legal representation, none of which was successful. 6 months later, seemingly out of the blue, the Innocence Project wrote me back. I didn't know before, but one of their intake workers represented my cases several times when the lawyers didn't want to take it. So on the third try, this intake worker, Maggie Taylor, got them to take the case.
We love you, Maggie.
Absolutely. Wouldn't be here without her. So they took the case. That's the first key. Second key is Pirro left office and her successor was willing to allow me to have further testing that Pirro wouldn't. And the third thing is we got lucky that the actual perpetrator's DNA was in the data bank. It was there because left free while I was doing time for his crime. He had killed a second victim 3.5 years later. It was killing a school teacher who had 2 children. So on September 20th, 2006, conviction was overturned. I was released and reported back to court November 2nd, 2006, at which point all the charges were dismissed against me on actual innocence grounds. And the actual perpetrator was confronted with the DNA. He confessed and he was subsequently arrested and convicted of the crime.
And you ended up spending how long in prison?
16 years.
16 years
From
for a crime you did
17
not
to
do.
32 for a crime I did not commit.
I cannot imagine. What do you even feel? Like, that's insane.
First words to agree with you and to cap off this point, my first words at the press conference was, "Is this really happening?" I felt like I finally did it. I finally managed to lose my mind, okay? And I was going to wake back up and be in the prison, but no, it actually all did happen. Listen, I was so ingrained and so afraid to hope that when my lawyer gave me the news that the conviction was being overturned the next day I was going to court, I didn't believe her. You know, she said, "You're going home." And I said, "No, I'm not." And she said, "You're going home." And I said, "No, I'm not." And one more time, we did the exchange, and I had the 3.5 hour of mental paralysis there, and my head was spinning, and one thought having nothing to do with the other, and none of the thoughts having anything to do with the news. And every now and then she'd cut in, and she'd say, "Are you ready to talk about tomorrow?" And I was like, "No, no, no. Listen, we're not talking about tomorrow. Not entertaining that. I'm not going home. Don't play with me that way. No. What made it real at the end was she said, look, there's a ton of work to do between now and tomorrow. Have to get your with the media, get them prepped. Got to get suit for you so you can appear in suit and proper clothing. And I felt better at that point for 5 minutes. And then a different fear came in my head, which was something's going to happen between that day and tomorrow, and they're going to change their mind. They're going to do what they always do, which is fight me and win. But it didn't. That didn't happen. But that's the stuff that went through my mind. But very difficult transition period, though. I have to share with you. So technology is different now. GPS, cell phone, internet hadn't been created, culture not created. Cities and towns look different. So cumulatively, those three elements, physical appearance, culture, technology, made me feel like I was in a parallel world.
Paint the scene. What year is it?
It's now 2006.
And you're how old?
I am now 32.
32.
Yeah, so then it was awkward when I'd meet up with members of my extended family. How we went over before, they never came to see me, or very sparingly did. So that was awkward. Was always passed over for gainful employment, so I didn't have very much income coming in. I was making money doing speaking engagements. I did catch on as a weekly columnist, but it was a weekly newspaper, so they only wanted one of them. So I lacked stability of housing at one point, coming a couple of weeks with the homeless shelter. Mercy College, which had given me a scholarship to finish the bachelor's degree, allowed me to live on campus. They gave me the meal plan.
Where was that at? Did you go back to your hometown, or you were like, screw that place?
So that was in Dobbs Ferry. So it was not in my hometown of Peekskill, but it was in the overall county, Westchester County.
Gotcha.
So that's how I avoided that. But listen, there's the psychological after effects. Like most people, when you've been wrongfully in prison, PTSD, panic attacks, anxiety. I felt like I had been frozen in time. So I was released when I was 32, but I felt like I was 17 because that's the age that I was when I was last free. I felt like I was processing things at a slower speed. Of course, fear on seeing law enforcement. So I had to see mental health professionals 4 times a week for 6 years, and that to adjust with the psychological after effects and managing life. And then, of course, the stigma. I was in prison for 16 years wrongfully. Yeah, but I was there for 16 years. So how much did that rub off on you? Is it safe to be alone someplace with you, Jeff? So when it comes to personal relationships, that certainly posed a significant obstacle. And then lastly, it was just straight up lonely, man. So it was a very difficult 5 years. They release you with nothing. I did file lawsuit and ultimately got compensation, but that took 5 years. I mean, there was
So
nothing.
5 years
It was
of battling that.
battling that. Yeah, there was nothing to help me get from point A to point B. So that was a very difficult time.
Can I ask, what did you get in the lawsuit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, it's some people are funny about money. I'm not, and it's public figures anyway. So I'll share with you. Key concept now is I'm going to keep saying that they paid, okay, as contrasted with I received. Okay, meaning, remember, so as a litigant, you have to pay the expenses. And then on top of that, you have to pay a third. The lawyers take the case on what's called a contingency, meaning they only get paid if you do. So they take the risk. But in exchange for that, they're allowed to take a third of the award.
A third?
Yes, a third.
Damn.
So as a litigant, you really keep 55 to 60%. So having done that education just then, I filed a claim in New York State Court of Claims. So they paid $1.85 million. I did file a federal civil rights lawsuit. I didn't let anybody go that had anything to do whatsoever. Anyone who had a hand in what happened to me brought a claim against. So there were 4 defendants in the federal civil rights lawsuit. Keeping in mind that, look, in the state court, it's like a no-fault claim. All you have to do is prove you were wrongfully imprisoned. To prevail in a federal civil rights lawsuit, you have to prove that there was a malicious violation of a constitutional right that led to the wrongful imprisonment. Okay, so brought a claim against Westchester County. Their medical examiner committed fraud. We talked about that earlier. They paid $6.5 million. Another defendant was Westchester County Legal Aid. That was for deficient representation. And so I'm not allowed to disclose how much that they settled with me. I settled with the city of Peekskill. They paid 5.3. And lastly, I went to trial against Putnam County. It was their polygraphist. I considered him to be the worst of the lot morally. He was like the but-for person, meaning until he stepped in, the Peekskill police had been unable to get me to falsely confess. And if he hadn't done that, I wouldn't have been a case on the prosecutor's file. Then the medical examiner wouldn't have committed fraud. I wouldn't have been a case on in the public defender's caseload for him to direct. So I wanted him to have a lawyer, present your evidence, question me. Okay, I'm going to question you. I'm going to present my evidence, and we're going to have neutral party to judge between us. Uh, I went to trial against him. The jury didn't realize. So there was we had what's called a high-low agreement in place. So Putnam County was concerned that they might get bankrupt. So they wanted me to assure them that they wouldn't have to pay over a certain amount of money. I was willing to give them that ceiling in exchange for a floor. So they had to agree that they wouldn't have to pay me over 10. But in exchange for that, they had to agree that they would, under no circumstances, would they pay me less than 6.5. So they could have actually won the case. They still would have been on the hook for that. So the purpose of the trial was to determine which figure it was that they paid. So I won a jury verdict there. So the jury didn't know that agreement was in place. They came back with like a $41,161,000 verdict. I know. Listen, dude, I don't regret doing the decision. Okay, would I like to get $41 million? Yeah. Who
41 mil, Jeff.
who wouldn't want to
Oh,
get that?
That
But
check would be so good.
it really would be. But here's the reality, though, right? Is that, they already had paid, the other parties already paid a lot of money already as it was. And the judge was probably almost certainly going to reduce the award. Then it would have went up on appeal. It probably would have been reduced more. And the money would have been tied up. And it's a possibility, though not sure, that maybe I might have gotten a little bit less than what the floor was. So I don't regret the decision.
Good. You did what you had to do.
I do what I had to do. Listen, and so I'm set for life.
So the all-in total of that is roughly, for being wrongly convicted?
So roughly, $25 million was paid. Okay, for
Okay, so 25 is paid, and then you got to take all the fees in that.
Fees in the third and all that.
Okay, and now you've got this life in front of you.
I've got this life in front of me.
It's back. We're back on, baby.
We're back on.
16-year freaking detour.
Yes.
You have this whole new hatred for the legal system, I'm sure, and deep understanding.
Well, I wouldn't phrase it as a hatred. So, but let me say this, and I'm going to come right to that point. So, at the same time as all the difficulties we laid out, okay, I was simultaneously doing advocacy work. So I gave a 2.5 hour off the cuff presentation at the press conference. Everything I ever wanted to say in 16 years, could never get anyone to hear me. Laid it out. Light bulb went off. I remember when I was in prison, I had read that some people who were exonerated, they would hit the speaking circuit. So I started speaking. So I started becoming an advocate. I was speaking, I was writing, we covered that. But I also was trading privacy for awareness by doing media interviews. I was regularly meeting with elected officials. So I'm doing all this advocacy work, got the bachelor's degree, didn't get into law school. So I decided that I would get a master's degree in criminal justice from John Jay College. My thesis is written on wrongful conviction cause and reform because I figured I could, with the extra credential, I'd be a better advocate. Now I get the money and it's a moment of truth now. Do I want to just be an individual advocate, or do I really want to go all in and try to free people that are in the same position? Because I could never free people on my own as an advocate, but I could through a nonprofit. So I committed $1.5 million from what I got to start the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice. So far, since opening our doors in 2011, I'm happy to say we have been able to free 14 people.
Come on, baby. Let's go.
Thank you. We helped pass 3 laws and another 6 as key members of the National Coalition Group. It Could Happen to You. And at some point, I became not satisfied with sitting in the front row of the courtroom. I wanted to be able to sit at the defense table, wanted to represent some of the clients, make some of the arguments, hence making a second foray to try to get into law school, got in this time, became an attorney in pursuit of the dream of exonerating others as a lawyer. Want to share that 2 years ago in December, That dream took a major step towards reality. I served as co-counsel to lead attorney Oscar Michelin. We overturned Andre Brown's wrongful conviction. Andre had been in for 23 years. He got released a couple weeks before Christmas, so he was able to spend that, with his son, daughter, and his wife. So now at this point, I have my own caseload. I have 9 cases I'm working on, co-counsel to Oscar and some other lawyers, but a couple where I am the lead attorney just to get the experience. Oscar put his ego aside and let me be the lead. So working on some cases, pushing policy work and policy changes, not just in New York, but also Pennsylvania, where I want to hold up that uh, Pennsylvania, one of 12 states that does not compensate people when they've been wrongfully imprisoned.
It's a
And
state law.
yeah, they don't have a state law to compensate anyone in Pennsylvania. So that's a border state to New York. So I know what it is to not be with compensation because of those 5 difficult
What are you supposed to
years.
do? Like your boy here, he's been in 23 years
Right.
and he's just starting from nothing.
Correct. So
Like, what are you gonna do?
compensation, very important tool in rebuilding your life. So, trying to pass the law there in Pennsylvania, and then in California. So in New York, the coalition group, we were able to pass the country's first. It's called Commission on Prosecutor Conduct, so independent oversight board that can investigate allegations of prosecutorial misconduct. So we passed that bill in New York. We're trying to pass that in California as well. That being a strategic thing. So when New York and California both pass the same law, in general, the rest of the country follows suit. So, prosecutorial misconduct is a major cause of wrongful conviction. It runs through many of the cases. And so, if you have something where, first of all, where victims of misconduct can go to have their case, have it reviewed, their allegations reviewed, that's one thing. And another thing, the hope is that it would deter some prosecutors from committing misconduct in the first place.
Do they just get tunnel vision? Like I just watched
Yes.
Presumed Innocent with Jake Gyllenhaal. Have you seen that TV show?
No, I have not.
Oh man, you got to. It's like the hot thing right now. Everyone's watching it. It's like the cool thing. I just binge watched the hell out of it this weekend. And he is a prosecutor.
Okay.
And then he ends up getting he becomes the defendant for
Wow.
it. It's super spicy. And basically they just get tunnel vision and they don't look at anybody but him. And he's like, "What? You guys are being lazy. Like there's so many other suspects and you're just not paying attention to it."
Correct. So tunnel vision is a major cause of wrongful conviction. I mean, I think on the police level, because when the DNA didn't match me, they could have refocused their investigation. The police actually went back out in the field when the DNA didn't match me, and they interviewed 17 witnesses who knew the victim in one capacity or another. They all told the police that she didn't have a boyfriend. There was no consensual sex, but the cops did not document any of those witness interviews. So it's certainly on the police level, on the prosecutorial level. I mean, why did they not end the case once the DNA didn't match me? Same thing in terms of my lawyer. I feel like judges, not just the trial judge, and not keeping this obviously coerced false confession out of evidence, but then all the appellate judges throughout the appeals process, not ruling for me when I'm challenging the confession and other improper things that happen. So I think that tunnel vision definitely happens.
Man.
So what I want to mention also, as an advocate, I love collaborating with organizations, Restorative Justice International, which is, based, of course, in California. So, I do collaborate some with them, advise them as a group, criminal justice and wrongful conviction issues when they're determining what their position is going to be. So I try to step back from an issue, show them all sides of an issue, then I give a recommendation, and then they decide what position that they're going to take. But they also interview political candidates and questionnaire and take recommendations. So I love working with them and with other people. Look, the age of going it alone is over. Okay, it's not that effective. It's better to work collaboratively and in coalition. So strength in numbers, and you can divide up tasks. So teamwork makes the dream work.
It really does. Your website has a lot of interesting numbers about this world. Can we run through some of those? So how many people are estimated to be wrongly convicted right now?
So there's a Wayne State University study. They estimate like 10,000 people wrongfully convicted each year. There are estimates based on that, several 100,000 people that are wrongfully, imprisoned across the U.S. New York, third in the country in terms of the sheer number of people that have been exonerated, 349, which is another way of saying that that number of people were wrongfully wrongfully imprisoned.
349 per year?
No, in the aggregate. So from 1989 forward, since the National Registry of Exoneration started keeping
349
stats.
have been cleared
Yes,
in New York.
in New York. Yes, and more than 35, yeah, more than 3,500 people across the U.S. also. So again,
That's
that's
a big delta, man.
it really is. That's those of us that have made it out. You can only count the people who've been exonerated. You can't count the people that's
Right.
wrongfully convicted, because if you could identify and get them out.
Of
right?
course.
Yeah. So those are some really important numbers. Want to share a little bit about intersection of race and wrongful conviction.
Please.
So per National Registry of Exoneration, so a Black defendant 7 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of murder as composed to other races, and 3.5 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of sexual assault. So there's definitely
Wow. That's
intersection of
horrible.
race and wrongful conviction for
7
sure.
times.
Yes.
We got work to do, man. And you're doing it.
Yeah.
Bravo.
we
You could
really
have
do.
taken that 25 mil or whatever you ended up being and been like, man, I'm going to that beach that I looked at every morning. But you went to law school.
I went to law
I'm really
school.
inspired by that.
Thank you. I can't forget about the men and women that I metaphorically left behind. I'm trying to be the person that I wish that I had while I was still on the inside. I make sense of everything that happened to me in a kaleidoscopic type way. I think I'm doing the work I'm supposed to do in the world. That's why I went through that. And so with that, I have I have an inner peace. It's healing, it's cathartic, it makes a difference, it makes my suffering count for something, and I have that inner peace. I'm not an angry person. I think you can tell from the interview. I want to enjoy as much as I can
You're a cool
my
dude.
life, and yet you can't enjoy your life and simultaneously be angry or bitter. And plus, I feel like I lost so much already as is. Why would I want to, in effect, lose the rest of my life? It's not like if I was angry or bitter, I would be impacting any of the people that had anything to do with what happened to me. The vehicle that allows me to actualize that is I take the energy that I feel and I channel it into the advocacy work, so I have my healthy release. My ultimate dream is to have a chapter of the Deskovic Foundation in each state and ultimately in each country. I really see this as a worldwide issue, and places where we don't hear about people being wrongfully convicted. It's not because the injustices aren't happening. It's because no one's digging, no one's looking, no one's working on exonerating, no one's being cleared. But all that, of course, is going to be when we get the public financial support, that we need. We currently have 13 active cases, but we have another 5 that are approved but waiting. So when we're able to raise additional funds, we can have other lawyers, investigators, paralegals, essential personnel, to increase our capacity. So I'm hoping if you're out there, if you have the ear of people that have capacity that this cause likely speaks to, please say something. We do have our crowdfunding page on Patreon. Dream with me for a second, Andrew. What if there were 25,000 people willing to donate $3 to $5 a month on a recurring monthly basis, right, through that Patreon page? I mean, that would give us close to $1 million. If we could get 13 people home, 14, on a shoestring. Imagine if we were really armed for bear. How many more people could we get home? So that's the dream. But I'm going to continue to do this fight and name the organization after me with the idea of it being a legacy. And look, my head's the right size, my feet firmly on the floor. I'm just a tool. I'm just a vessel. In this cause, just trying to do the best that I can. Feeling so fortunate that I've had educational opportunities that many other people haven't had. And so just feel a moral responsibility to do what I can, and I do this work. And so
It's a worthy cause, man, and we are 100% behind you. I think it's so beautiful that people who've gone through some of the harshest things in the world, right? Like your story is hard to digest, man. Like it's freaking real and it's raw. And I commend you so much for having nothing but love in your heart, right?
Mhm.
You don't have this bitterness like you just
No.
said. And somebody has said on that exact couch in a conversation with me, Sanjeev Chopra, a really wise man. He's a Harvard dean, meditation guru, brother to Deepak. And he said, having spite towards somebody who's wrongly done something to you is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die
Correct.
or to be impacted.
Yeah.
And so kudos for you for making the most of your life, man. And I just have a few more questions and then we'll round this out.
Of course.
What were things that you missed the most when you were locked up for, you said 16 years?
Yes, 16 years.
What were the little things that you missed the most?
So, all right. So the little things were, I I miss the fresh air, man. I miss the sun on my face. You don't get a lot of fresh air and sun while you're in prison. They would always close the prison yard when it would start to get dark. So just the act of being able to be outside in the dark. But I love being able to have access to information and just freedom, choices, and options that are just not present while you're in prison because you have those limitations. So I appreciate those small things and freedom of movement. Those things. Some of the things I wanted to do, just travel, man. I
You
used
just
to.
got back from Taiwan
I
a couple
did.
days ago.
I did. I did. I collaborated with the Taiwanese Innocence Project. There, they've freed 13 people since opening their doors in 2012. So they had an Taiwan Innocence Project conference. So I spoke several times over there, including at their conference, talking about surviving wrongful imprisonment, both inside and outside of prison. But
You're
listen,
doing the travel. That's great.
I did. So, listen, went there for advocacy work, but make no mistake, I definitely did some sightseeing and went up a mountain and to see the incredible views and went to the presidential palace. If you're ever there, please go to they call it the White Terror Museum. So in a time period where it was an authoritarian regime and human rights abuses all the time, and where just obviously politically motivated, but nonetheless sharing many characteristics of other modern day wrongful conviction cases, false confessions, prosecutorial misconduct, judges signing off on things, defense lawyers not really defending their clients. Went to an observatory again, so great view. They have art exhibit, Taiwan's long walk to democracy, Taiwan's long walk to freedom of speech. So
Such a cool
wherever
place.
I am, I love to go to civil rights museums and
Mm,
places. So I
love that.
consider that we all stand on the shoulders of giants.
Mhm.
So I consider that the work I'm doing to be civil rights in nature. So the same type of work that people greats that came
Before you.
before me. Yeah, people like Thurgood Marshall, Roy Wilkins, Malcolm X, Dr. King, Harriet Tubman. All these different aspects of helping people fight for freedom. And just feeling a kinship with that, and loving to come across historical places. I mean, my hair stands up on the back of my neck when I have stood next to signs, for example, where Underground Railroad. This was a stop on the Underground Railroad, or this historical place, or another. But also reading about tactics that people and looking at how they mirror tactics so many people leafleted and they wrote articles and they did speaking engagements, and I'm thinking these are part of the same tactics, some of the same tools in the toolbox. So just feeling a oneness with people who sacrifice, who give of themselves, who fight for
Yeah,
freedom,
part
who
of
are
a bigger
seeking to
energy.
who are, right
Right.
who are seeking to better the people, man.
That's beautiful. Okay, so travel, movement, nature, fresh air, anything else?
Yes, new things. So new activity, new experience, go to new places, try new food. So when I go to a restaurant, so the more wild an item is on the menu, the more likely I am to order it and try it. Yeah, so I mean, to me, all those things, activities, experiences, new places, food, travel, that's all part of experiencing the world. So I love to do that, and I feel like I am richer in that way. So
Man, I love that. And I think for our listeners, it's important reminders to not take those things for granted. You
correct,
certainly didn't think that you would have your freedom stolen for 16 years.
right?
Crazy shit can happen. And
Yeah,
so do not take any day for granted.
absolutely not. I'd like to give a tip. If the police want to speak with you, you you have to insist on asking for a lawyer. So most people think, well, if I haven't done anything and I don't know anything,
Just
why
talk.
should just talk? What could possibly happen? But actually quite a bit. Look right here. This can happen. You got to ask for a lawyer. Don't let them talk you out of that. Don't worry about if that makes you look guilty. You're not going to talk your way out of an arrest if they're determined to arrest you. Kind of like what they say. Anything they say can and will be used against you in a court of law. They're going to twist your words around, try to make it look incriminating. Wait for them to provide you an attorney. The attorney will level the playing field, and at that point, any conversation that has to happen can take place with the playing field leveled by the attorneys present. They won't be able to overreach you, coerce you, pressure you, make false promises. Basically, the things that they did to me, which had the disastrous, calamitous impact of ultimately costing me 16 years in prison. Same thing if police pull you over and they want permission to search your trunk. You would never agree to allow the police to search your trunk. So you just be very clear verbally. Look, officer, I do not consent to you searching the trunk. If you searched my car, just know that you're doing that against my will. Let them do it. Take it up in court later and get yourself killed. But you just verbalize that you're not consenting to that. And you because unfortunately there have been examples of people who put on the uniform that are less than honorable and, pretending, well, I found this gun or there's this drugs in your car.
That's great. Thank you for that tip. One thing I do with all guests, we'll end here, is I want to do a 60-second brag. What are the things that you're most proud of accomplishing? They could be the silliest things or the biggest things. It could be things we've covered or we've not covered. But for 60 seconds, the floor is going to be yours, and you have to rapid fire what you're most proud of in your life. Hold on. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
Graduating law school, passing the bar on the first go round, helping to free Andre Brown, starting the foundation, traveling to many places. I've been able to do like a week-long tour, Armenia, Argentina, working with advocates on the ground. My brother and I dominated all the other riders on the bumper cars in Coney Island, and we went on the ride 5 times.
Let's go. Anything else?
Those are the fact that I never gave up. All those things I'm proud of, and not having hate or being bitter within me. I'm proud of those things.
Jeffrey, you have the most inspiring story. Thank you for not quitting. Thank you for being a force of good, man, and thank you for being my new brother and sharing your story.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're a real one. All right. Good luck with everything, brother.